There will be 6 judges. All right. These are our judges for the grand finale. Now moving on to our high school finalists.
So the high school prompt was the following. The Biden administration strongly endorsed the $15 minimum wage, and President Biden has already begun signing executive orders with his first few days in office. Do you believe that we should have a national mandate for a $15 minimum wage?
All right. Go. So our first high school finalist is Dia Nambiar. Dia, you ready? All right. Whenever you want, you can start.
Struggle, stress, and hopelessness. Masses of time are lost with families in order to working shift days in and out. Every day, many families suffer from dealing with the struggles of minimum wage pay. Individuals around the U.S. work long shifts in order to provide for their families, but it simply isn't enough. In most of the United States, an individual with an annual income of $12,000 or less is classified as living below the poverty line. Let that sink in. There are approximately 330 million people living in the US. This poverty line is absolutely absurd. Nationwide, 9.6% of the 43.5 million people living below the poverty line also reside in communities of concentrated poverty. Though the share of the population living in each low income has fallen considerably in the recent years, there are still 43.5 million Americans living in poverty. This is a number that will likely climb as the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has crippled the US economy and continues to threaten businesses and livelihoods. The most valued option we have is to increase the minimum wage to $15. Why so, some people ask? According to a report found on Business Insider, increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 by 2025 will do a lot of good. It will lift 900,000 people out of poverty, raise income for 17 million people, which is 1 in 10 workers, and it will tune in $509 billion over the 10 years. This could potentially increase wage for another 10 million people who currently make close to $15. Gradually raising the federal minimum wage to $15 by 2025 will lift pay for 30 million workers, which is 21% of the US workforce. Affected workers who work year-round could earn an extra $3,300 a year. And this is enough to make a tremendous difference in the life of a cashier, a health aide, or a fast food worker who today struggles to get by on less than $25,000 a year. A $15 minimum wage would begin to reverse decades of growing pay inequality between the most underpaid workers and workers receiving close to the median wage. Particularly along gender and racial lines, equal pay is very much invested into this whole idea of minimum wage. Race and gender is definitely a huge role in minimum wage and the pay that we see in the United States. By increasing the minimum wage, we are also increasing hope within families. Families come home to a family that they have to feed, they have to shelter, they have to provide education to. And it's very necessary to keep this in mind. A pregnant woman who has a baby on the way could be working at a fast food restaurant in order to make sure that she has a life prepared for the baby when they come out. Now, this pregnant woman has to make sure that she is safe as well. And she has to make sure that she is giving herself enough time to prepare to give birth. But by working hours and hours upon shifts, she is basically taking away from the time she has with her soon-to-be child. By increasing the minimum wage, we are providing hope for families. We are giving them happiness, and we are lifting their spirits that they didn't have when the wage wasn't so high enough. By increasing the minimum wage, we are giving hope, and we're also increasing the individual's work ethic. People will work hours and hours when they have a goal of, when they are working towards a goal. Sorry about that. By working towards a goal, they have this key point in their mind that they are going to make enough money to provide for their kids' education, for their future, and for their kids to have happiness. And generations upon generations will lead with success and future upbringings by the past generations, which is what we are in today. Let's create a base foundation so that our future can live a very, very affluent life. Thank you so much.
Great job, Dia. Great speech. Our second public speaking high school finalist is Pranav Krishnan. Pranav, you ready?
Hunger, starvation, and poverty. What if I said that one idea could solve each and every problem like this? That idea is to increase the minimum wage to $15. The current minimum wage in the United States is $7.25. Although a $8 increase does not seem much at the start, for most of us, it does not. But for some, it is their livelihood. It is what they live on each and every day. And this such increase could help almost around 17 million people to become better, to lead better lives, and to become us, one of us. It can increase around 900,000 people's life for the better. It can take them out of poverty, and they could be human beings, normal human beings, just like us. When we have to consider this, we also have to keep in mind that these people are desperate for money. They're homeless and they are below poverty line. This means that just an $8 increase for each and every hour could be beneficial to them in many ways that we take it as luxury. Or even though these people are below the poverty line, this $15, this $8 increase can have huge impact on their lives. Many argue that the companies that they are providing money with are not getting profit by this because there are small companies, large companies, and many of the small companies are losing money just by increasing the minimum wage. Well, that is true. And for large companies, for CEOs, we can say that their net worth is somewhere around $1 billion. Considering that, if they give $15 to a poor worker, that's not going to affect them in any way. For small companies, this is where the government steps in. The government should provide these small companies with money so that they are able to provide money to their employees, and they can also strive for their food. These employees, although they are below poverty line, they accept it. And these employees make most of their living so that each and every time they strive for food, they are able to come out on top. Many of us believe that this can affect the country in a negative way. This can lead to inflation. And there are so many other byproducts of it that we have to consider in order to take this small step. But honestly, there's a business static that could reduce inflation. If you are increasing money just to buy some product, many people are not likely to buy it. They're just going to throw that away and go to a new product, which is a lot cheaper than this. And that is the exact reason why I would suggest that companies will not raise money. Even though the minimum wage increases, the companies will be scared just because of this one thing, because their products will not be sold as frequently as others. It's not an exaggeration when I say that the lives of 17 million people is in your hands. And their livelihood, their money, they coming throughout the world, they getting out of poverty, depends on you. It begins with you, and it's your choice to make. Therefore, choose wisely, because these are people who are striving for food every day, who need your help.
Great job, Pranav. These were kind of difficult topics, so good job. Our next speaker is Shamit Satish. Shamit, you ready?
Yes. Hi, I'm Shamit Satish. Just imagine 1.5 million people losing their job in a span of a couple months? Wouldn't this be devastating? After working hard your entire life and you still lose your job, is this really fair? I believe having a $15 minimum wage would cause this, and this would be very harmful to the US economy and unfair to the hardworking people of the United States. According to the Congressional Budget Office's report, having a $15 minimum wage would reduce employment by 1.4 million jobs yearly and increase the federal deficit by $54 billion in a span of 10 years. That's a large amount. Adding more debt to this country would be damaging for the future of the economy. With the increase in minimum wage, employers will intend to employ a much smaller amount of people. Small businesses would have the most effect. Because of low revenue, they won't be able to afford many employees. This could lead to many small businesses going out of business. With many large companies, would have to terminate a large number of contracts due to this. A large portion of the United States is the middle class. This would have tremendous damage to this part, and lots of jobs in corporate America would be lost. This would affect many corporate jobs and many families in the United States. The increased minimum wage would affect and escalate the cost of living in the United States. When the cost of to create a product or service is increased, the prices of the product or service will increase as well. The prices of many average products and essential products would increase, but with the many jobs being lost, not everyone can afford them. The impact of retail sales would affect the stock market in many ways. Well, there are some advantages and disadvantages, but I'm afraid to say that the downsides outweigh the advantages. Overall, I believe the $15 minimum wage would cause more harm to the United States economy. That's it.
All right. Good job, Shabbat. Our fourth speaker finalist is Arjun R. Kumar. Arjun, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, judges, inspired leaders, and guests. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Now, the question that you have brought upon me has great ramifications on the entirety of our country. Therefore, I would ask you to listen closely to my speech because I feel that I will address these topics efficiently. Now, the question that you brought is whether we should implement the $15 minimum wage. Now, before we get on to what I believe, I feel that we should address what the minimum wage is first. The minimum wage is the amount of money that you pay a worker per hour, typically. Now, before we get into the specifics of pros and cons of minimum wages, we should first understand the history. In 1831, in Lyon, France, workers had a strike in which they protested for a fair livable wage. They were denied those rights. However, they brought forth to the world the idea of a fair livable minimum wage. Massachusetts also tried to implement something like this later on. However, it was struck down by the Supreme Court. After that, FDR, in the 1936 re-election prospect, also tried to go for something like this. However, he was also struck down by the Supreme Court. Later on, in what was called the Big Switch, the Supreme Court decided to rule that a minimum wage was fair and allowable because it did not violate the sanctity of a contract between the worker and the employee. After that, Joe Biden also tried to implement this, as the minimum wage went from 75 cents in the early stages to $7.25 now. Joe Biden tried to implement this in the American Rescue Plan for $15 as a minimum wage. However, he was struck down by the Senate parliamentarian as he said that that did not fit into the strict rules of budget reconciliation, and it was rather happenstance taxing and spending. Now that brings us to the present question. Should we have a $15 minimum wage? I believe that the pros outweigh the cons, that it does more good than harm. Therefore, I believe that we should have the $15 minimum wage. The Economist, the world's foremost leading publication on governmental, political, and financial affairs, agrees with me by it saying Higher pay comes out of companies' profits with little associated to employment cost. Therefore, I believe that we should follow this dictum and that we do have a fair, livable $15 minimum wage. Now, I would also like to add that the minimum wage helps poor people out of against inflation. It helps them because it gives them the ability to spend more, or at least live a basic livelihood rather than have to continually face against the pressures of competing with somebody else for the price of like Lysol or something. And that brings me to my second point. It will help the American economy in general because as employees have more money to spend, they'll spend it for the vacation that they've been putting off for so long to Disneyland, a car wash that they've been asking for, or just a night out for dinner. That's what we're fighting for at a $15 minimum wage. I would also like to add that some people say that it will adversely affect employers and businesses, and I understand that. Yes, it may affect small businesses particularly. However, it will outweigh the pros outweigh the cons in this as well. Small businesses always find a way to get back against large businesses or just in the economy in general. Small businesses will always find a way to get back to where they were or even better because of the fundamental law of capitalism. Only the strongest survive. Now, I understand that some people are having problems with this. I understand that this is a huge problem for everybody, and I understand that employers may not be able to give those $15 minimum wages. However, this is essential for the employee. We have to be focused on the employee rather than the employer. Now, historically, we have repeated the idea of increasing the minimum wage. Let's just do it again. Thank you.
Great job, Arjun. Great job. And our last speech for the evening is Siddhant Mane. He is the last high school finalist. Siddhant, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Whenever you want, you can start.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. In the 21st century, could you imagine working day in and day out, constantly toiling just to support your family, but only earning only $11 an hour? But this is the reality in the country of the United States. So just to clarify, while $11 an hour is the rate in NJ, it is a good average of the whole country because states such as California and New York have the minimum wage for $15 an hour. So it differs per state. Hence, I believe that President Joe Biden's push for increasing the minimum wage is paramount to the country's benefit. While this may not seem as much, it is a raise of about 136%, and it is necessary to implement too. This will greatly benefit employees and thus will increase the employment rate. But the greatest impact will be for the large businesses, or at least the owners of the large businesses, because they'll have to pay much more in order to support their whole business. So I understand that employers may be complaining about paying so much to their employees, but at the end, I think it's the government's job to help support the businesses because this will greatly increase the employment rate and will also lead to helping the country as a whole and the increase of the country's GDP, which is the gross domestic product, right? But I think that increasing the minimum wage will also the increase of the minimum wage will also be necessary because many employees live without very few live without I'm just gonna reset. I also believe that increasing the minimum wage will lead to increase in products, in the price of the products such as food and even water. So why, you may be asking? Because the owners will realize that since they have to pay much more to their employees, they'll have to overprice their products, and hence many of the customers will be unhappy with this. And this will negatively impact much of the businesses. So again, the government will have to step in to support the business. Additionally, I think the bank also has to step in, because at the end they hold the control for the of the money, and they can loan the owners of the businesses. So to conclude, while many employees may while many employers may experience a very negative impact to this change, President Joe Biden's push for this change is necessary and will increase the employment rate, firstly, and secondly, it will impact the whole economy, and it will also increase the country's GDP. Thank you.
Great job, Siddhant. All right, that concludes the grand finale. Grand finale is still yet to come, but the finalist public speaking portion of the entire competition.